And that's when I said burritos just don't move like that, right? If you have a whole, like, if you have yards of corn on the cob, right in there. What? Since when? Holy crap. Steve Weiner here from GetRubix.com, and today we need to address a security concern around autopilot so that folks don't flip out. And this has been going around Twitter and the interwebs, and I thought it was appropriate that we address it head on. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Yeah, I think the problem is your burritos aren't fast enough, but we got to do this. We don't have time for this right now. Okay, so this week there's been a lot of activity on Twitter. I don't recall where it first came from. A lot of the Microsoft community's been talking about it, and that's what's so great about the community. So there seems to be an autopilot hole, right? So to start off, I'm going to put this link in the description. This is the article that kind of breaks down everything here. It was by Maurice, Daly, and Sandy Zeng. I apologize if I'm butchering the names. But this is a great article, and it kind of talks about everything we're going to talk about today in depth. It's written out. It's got essentially all this good information in it. But I'm just going to kind of show you and walk you through a demo of what's actually happening and how we can prevent it. So this is a device I have registered in Autopilot, and I'm going to show you based on the serial number 29668807. So this is the first part, 2966. And we're going to see, there it is, 29668807. It's registered. It has an autopilot profile assigned because right now that's how I have my devices set up in the lab. I register them in Autopilot either through a partner or through the PowerShell hash. So now that we verified this device is an Autopilot, by proceeding with the out-of-box experience, the assumption is I've given this to an end user who is licensed in my tenant, and this device came from me as the organization. And you can see here, because it's registered in Autopilot, it brings me to my company branding. And the reason this is happening, and I'm just going to kind of show you here, is if I were to open the registry, let's do reg edit. Okay, so if we open the registry and go to Microsoft, it should be down in provisioning and autopilot policy. We can see a few things. We can see I have this correlation ID, which is what it receives when it registers with autopilot. But if I go to the policy cache, this is really interesting. This is JSON, right? This is a JSON payload that was delivered to my device from Autopilot. And that information is coming from the deployment profile. Standard user, I have a naming convention. You saw that in the registry. So this profile basically, like most things from Intune, gets pushed down in a JSON format. And that's what that is. So what folks are noticing is there's another method of autopilot enrollment. Traditionally for your current devices that are managed, that are maybe domain join managed by SCCM, or if you just want to image devices and have that autopilot profile as part of the image, you could do what's called a autopilot offline enrollment, where you can actually take that JSON and apply it to a device. But this kind of raised a concern, and I'm going to walk you through it. So in my Intune environment, I have an enrollment restriction set up. This is very common for folks who are using Autopilot, and it's a a corporate enrollment method, or you're bringing over devices from your domain join that are hybrid join, and you want the group policy to put them in Intune. So I am specifically with Windows here. I am blocking personally owned devices, meaning I can't go to Best Buy, right, or wherever, nothing against Best Buy. I can't go buy a personal machine and enroll it in Intune in my organization. It has to come from Autopilot. So let's take a look at what that is. So this PC is not registered in Autopilot, and I'm going to show you that. We're just going to kind of go through the out-of-box process. All right, so we already see a very different experience. I'm seeing the review the license agreement screen. It's going to offer me to rename my device. I could skip that. So because this is a personal device, I'm being asked, is this for personal or is it for work or school? And let's say I did want to set it up for work or school. I could still try to use my credentials. So let's use Rick Jones at rubixdev.com. Let's put our password in. And take a look at this. The feature is not supported. Contact your administration. So I am locked out on a personal device that I bought. I'm trying to like slip into my company using corporate credentials. It's blocked, and it's blocked because of that enrollment restriction. So this is exactly what we want. We don't want personal devices getting in. But there is, unfortunately, a way around this that we are going to look at. So, all right, so this is Autopilot JSON. And what I mean by this is if we look at that device, take a look at the JSON that came down from Autopilot that actually is the profile, that's the same in every tenant. So if you take a look here, this is somewhat generic with a few variables. So now if you were going to make this for your own organization to do the offline autopilot, you would need this. But let's make some malicious assumptions. So if I can get the tenant ID, so let's say I've acquired someone's credentials from Rubik's Dev. I could just go to whatismytenantid.com. I can put in rubiksdev.com, right? I only need to know that name and hit this. And now I've found my tenant ID. And you'll see that is the tenant ID right there. So in theory, I can then take that and paste it here. Okay, what do I need next? The name, I'm just going to leave this so we can identify it. Stranger, random, 4 characters, right? Not a big deal. Well, we know the name, so we have to put the name there. Rubik's Dev. Put it down here, Rubik's Dev. What's a correlation ID? That's a random GUID, right? Well, it's a GUID generated during the process, but I could just go to PowerShell and hit new GUID. And I can just use anything here, unfortunately. There we go. So what do I do with this? This is called fake autopilot JSON, right? I named the file. But if I were to name it this, autopilot, let's call it autopilot configuration file, what can I do with it? Okay, so we're going to go back to our personal device that would not let me in. It is not an autopilot device, and I'm going to show you that it's not in there. It always feels like this is a magic trick of some kind. BIOS get serial number. 1259 is what it starts with. So if we go back here and go into the device enrollment, you will see there is no 1259. If I search for it, it is not there. This device is not an autopilot, as you saw before. But what if I type in Explorer in the command prompt and I were to make my way, C Windows provisioning autopilot? And what if I just drop that file right in this folder? What would happen? Oh, that's not good. It's still not an autopilot device, as far as I know. 1259, it's not here. So how did that work? Well, surely it's not going to let me in because it knows it's a personal device. I'm going to try the same credentials. So at this point, it's still a personal device. It's not corporate, so it's not going to let me in, right? It's going to stop me with that error and not let me to the enrollment status page. Okay, so clearly this is a problem, right? If we go here, we're going to see that the device is signed in as Rick Jones. I'm connected, managed by Rubik's Dev, right? And if we go, it's syncing with Intune. All right, well, it's here, right? So, I mean, I got in. So, yes, this is a problem. But let's talk about some assumptions that were made. So, what we have here in order to make this work is someone with knowledge of autopilot and understands how the JSON works. Lifted credentials, right? And the last piece, I would say, would be the posture of the tenant. Now, yes, I had personally owned device enrollment blocked, but I want to show you a few things. This is one of my standard autopilot builds in this tenant, right? You see that it has the backdrop. It has some apps. It has company portal, installed on it. It has a lot of restrictions and access to things that look different than the personal one I snuck in. So why is that? So I want to point out a few things. The device is not here yet. It still is not registered in Autopilot. However, what a lot of folks do is they have in their Autopilot profile, they have a setting called Convert All Targeted Devices to Autopilot. What this means, and I have it on no, this means that when you scope this profile to a device, like I was just showing you a personal one that was offline joined, it will register here in Autopilot. Let's back up for a second, because I know a lot of folks are going to say they like to use that convert devices to Autopilot because when they're bringing in devices from group policy into Intune or from config-man and co-manage, they want to convert them that way. It's not worth it. There are other ways to convert the devices. What I'm saying is you don't have to click yes here. You can use something like, just a PowerShell script deployed to all devices to get the hash and post it, right? We do that in the migration solution. So leaving this off, which I generally do, that's a great defense right there to start. Because now that it's in, if that's on, if it wipes, it's going to be in this list and can receive a profile if the profile is assigned to all devices. My profiles are not assigned to all devices. My profile is assigned to M365 devices. What is M365 devices? M365 devices are devices that contains, I know I need to switch the contains. I didn't do that yet. If you know, you know. If not, I'll do a video later. Don't worry about that right now. The order ID M365, the group tag. The group tag is so important. The group tag is where my policies are assigned, my apps are assigned, and you're not going to get an Autopilot. You're not going to get an Autopilot profile from me if you don't have the group tag. And the group tag is something an outside actor can't just get. They can get the tenant ID if they get stolen credentials, if they know the tenant name. Chances are they're not going to know the group tag. And if they do know it, there's not a good way for them to apply it, right? It can only be applied during registration or through the graph. So let's do this. So the first mitigation rule, I would say, is all your policies, all your Autopilot profiles don't have anything assigned to all devices. Okay, you want to assign to a group tag. Now, you can have inherited group tag models. I'm going to put this link below. I think it's a good idea to not just have all Autopilot devices, anything registered. I think what you want to do is you want to have an inherited model. This is an example, Win-AP. Win-AP Corp is where my Corp build is. Win-AP, if it contains the first part, is still going to get stuff, but it has to be tagged. So this is a really good way to start making sure a device is not entitled to stuff just by having, just by being an Autopilot, right? So that's the first step. I highly recommend group tags. Something else that was called out is the enrollment profile here for this, rogue device. So let's go grab the object ID and let's go look in the graph. All right, there's two things I want to show you. The first is Autopilot enrolled is false. It very much is false. It is not enrolled in Autopilot. And as long as we don't set that targeted group to yes, it's not going to be enrolled in Autopilot. We tricked it. The other thing I want you to look at is this. Enrollment profile name starts with offline Autopilot profile. Okay? This is something I can identify and filter out. So we can create a policy and say prevent offline Autopilot. We can say all users, just for safety, I'm going to exclude myself, because when you're testing something, you should always exclude yourself. My target resources are going to be all cloud apps. My conditions are going to be device platforms, Windows. Oh, come on, Windows. And my filter for devices are going to be include filtered devices in policy. So where the enrollment profile name starts with, okay, offline autopilot profile. And then grant is going to be block access. So anyone coming from a Windows device, right, that has that enrollment profile in it that's offline will not get in. All right, and generally with policies, you want to do report only, but I'm gonna turn this on. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's reset this so we can put some measures in place and keep it out. So I'm gonna go back here, and through the magic of Hyper-V, we are going to go back. Okay. All right, we're going to try the same scenario again. We are going to open the Explorer. We are going to go to See Windows Provisioning Autopilot, and we are going to drop in our fake profile, and we're going to proceed. And let's see how far we get this time. Okay, so let's try this again. RubixDiv.com. Same password. So what happened? The device got in. However, I want to show you some things here. In fact, let me try to go to Edge here. Let me sign in. I can't access Edge. I can't even get into that. So I don't meet the criteria. Okay, but it's enter joined, right? It's not signing me in. So I won't be able to get far. I won't be able to get to Teams. I won't be able to get to corporate data. You can see OneDrive hasn't started up. So that is one option. I'm also not going to receive anything. I'm not going to receive, you know, apps or policy because I'm not group tagged, right? So this is something you can do, right, to kind of mitigate it. So essentially to me, this device is, going to be bricked, right, as far as what I can do, at least with corporate data, right? If we take a look here, it's not even going to sync to Intune, right? The sync's going to be broken. So this is probably the best thing you can do. And there's a few other methods that were mentioned in the article I just want to call out. Definitely device settings. Require multi-factor authentication to register or join. This is a great idea too. You switch this to yes. Now during autopilot, you're going to be prompted for multi-factor authentication, right, in order to even join the device. So that's another good measure there to kind of plug this hole, so to speak. I think the last thing to touch on too is compliance in general, right? What is making your device able to access corporate resources? So one idea would be to use custom compliance to look at the differences between the devices. So if you look at a real autopilot device, if we were to look at an actual autopilot device, right, this is going to have a key for autopilot policy, cloud assign device name, right? Because we're not cloud assigning it, that attribute won't be there in our sneaky method, right? It's just going to have this autopilot mode. So that's something to possibly look for to mark a device uncompliant. So, in the future, we might talk about how to do that in a custom compliance policy. Again, massive shout out to the community for calling this out, for Maurice and Sandy to put this together. This is a problem. However, again, we have to assume certain things. And just like anything, I'm going to go back to something that was said early on when this all started, is that autopilot is not a security tool. It's never intended to be. It's a provisioning tool. How far you get in the process, how the device can access resources, the posture of the tenant in general, these are still things we have to take into consideration, as this is just another attack vector. However, I think it's going to be important for Microsoft to make this a little easier to mitigate, to give us some options for those who have to use the offline JSON, because it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think it's also important that, they got to give us the option to point in the GUI and Intune to the autopilot enrolled value, true or false. And if it's false, we should be able to block it if we want to at enrollment. If you have questions, jump into the Discord. Be happy to talk about it. And yeah, stay safe out there. We'll be seeing you.
5, 4, 3,